Morning. Happy Thursday. One day left after this one. Yay. All right. So yesterday we got into Vietnam War. Today we're getting into the Vietnam draft. The draft is an interesting topic because it's one that it's always out there as an option for our government, but I don't think it'll ever happen again. I think in this day and age of political correctness and equality, the talk of equality and everything, I think the lawsuits towards the draft would be through the roof. I think there would be people. It'd be a mess. It would be a mess. So I don't think now. While you still have to register, when you turn 18. But I don't think there will ever be one again. I would be if they're calling for a draft again. That is pretty much a code red that we're in trouble. So that's not a good sign if they're calling for a draft. But let's go back to the Vietnam draft of the 1960s. All right, at the top of your document for today, there should be a bar graph of the soldiers, U.S. soldiers in Vietnam, starting in 1959. Again, advisors. It's not until 1965, well, it looks like here. It's not until about 1964. Well, let's start in 1964. Very small pink cube down at the bottom of the graph. About 3,300 troops sent. That's all President Johnson. That's him. I don't know other way to say it. He's trying to get reelected. So you see a huge jump in 1965 after Johnson's election, President Lyndon Johnson. And then the highest number is in 1968. We were right around 500,000, over 500,000 troops in Vietnam, right? But how many were in 1964? 3,300. Tip of the iceberg right there. Number two, how many troops were being sent to Vietnam by 1968? 536,100. And I have 536,000, 1,000 on there. 536,100. So a little over 500,000 troops are in Vietnam by 1968. You could argue 1968 is the peak of the Vietnam War as far as its violence goes, as far as number of casualties go. So we'll get into that later. Where it becomes, that's where Vietnam becomes a huge mess. And that actually in 1968 forces President Johnson to say, you know what, I'm not going to get reelected anyway. This war is a disaster. I'm not running for re-election. And Johnson bows out. Chooses not to run for re-election that year. There's a good chance he would have lost to Richard Nixon anyway. Really good chance. That's how bad the war was going. All right, let's take a look at this graphic, these pie charts, bar graphs, whatever you want to call them. For number 3, what education level did most people have that were drafted in the Vietnam War? Most Vietnam draftees at least had a high school diploma, but the majority of them, that's all they had, right? And then anybody that dropped out of high school, they were definitely looking at getting drafted. Very few college students. There were college students that got drafted, but college kept a lot of kids off that list. Now, here's an important thing to think about. College wasn't in 1968. College wasn't nearly as accessible as it is today here in 2020. I think anybody can go to college here in 2020, but in 1968, college was very much a rich kid's place to go. Kids with money were able to go. Kids whose families had influence went to college, right? So the draft stayed away. You might have heard me say every war is a rich person's war. I might have to take care of my son here for a second. Hang on. Luke, come here. Come here, Luke. I'm right here. Mickey Mouse is doing a terrible job babysitting. Now, every war is a rich person's war. There's a Creedence Clearwater Revival song. You might want to ask your parents or your grandparents about it, called Fortunate Son. And if you listen to it, it's very much about kids that people not getting drafted into Vietnam because their dad's a senator or something like that. All right, let's jump to number 4. What 2 types of people were mostly drafted into the war? poor, and working class. Yep, hang on. Yeah, come here. You want to come be on the video? You want to lecture about the Vietnam draft with me? Come here. Come here, buddy. You want to find your toys? Okay, we're back. So, poor and working class people were young guys were drafted into Vietnam. During what year were most African Americans drafted in the Vietnam War? That's a great question. Looks like 1968. 1968, the year that Martin Luther King was assassinated, the year that Richard Nixon got elected to be president. 1968 was a very, very violent, tumultuous year in American history. I compare it to, in our lifetime, I compare it to 2016. I think they're one and the same. I think they follow the same script. Presidential election year that's hotly contested. A lot of civil rights protesting going on. I consider those the same 2 years. You know? All right, scrolling along. Number 6. What does it mean to be 1A? 1A means you're at the top of the list, buddy. You're at the top of the list. How do you get to be 1A? If you get caught protesting, there were people that would receive their draft cards in the mail and they'd send it back, right? That was a really good way to get to the top of the list. If you were maybe looking at jail time of some kind, you were going to be 1A. Hey. You okay? What's the matter? It's amazing how high-pitched my voice gets when I'm talking to a 1-year-old. Or a 2-year-old here in a couple weeks, aren't you? You going to be a big boy? He's having a hard time. I think his legs are growing, which is not anything I'm familiar with, so I can't really relate to him. But he can't get comfortable at all, and I hate it for him. So we also think he might have some teeth coming in, too, so there's that. You kicking Daddy off the couch? You don't want Daddy sitting on the couch with you? Well, let me finish my video and then I'll get off, okay? You better watch it. You're going to be 1A. Yeah, I know. All right, so what was it about Vietnam, number 7, that made draftees almost guaranteed to die? Move over here. What was it about Vietnam that made draftees almost guaranteed to die? I think this is a both of the above, their environment. If, let's say, you were a kid that grew up in Fairdale, right, in a rural community, the closest thing to the jungle for you was Jefferson Memorial Forest, right? It's not quite the same as the Vietnamese jungle. I'm just going to point that out. And also, there were a lot of kids, because they were poor, because they were working class, maybe didn't have the money to go on vacation ever. They'd never been away from home, right? So now you're sending this 17 or 18-year-old kid into, like, straight out of high school graduation, sending them to the jungles of Vietnam. Those kids are going to be scared. There's a good chance, and there's an even better chance they're going to die. You know? These kids were put in a situation that they weren't in position to win. I hope if you have any Vietnam veterans in your family, feel free to show them this video because I think they would appreciate this. I hope. But there are kids that never had a shot, you know. And if you're a Vietnam veteran, what's the matter? Come here. Come here. Why are you being so fussy? Can I finish my video, please? I'm almost done. I promise. So yeah, the environment, again, I mentioned it earlier. The Viet Cong were literally coming up from the ground attacking these people. And if you're a young guy, 18 years old from Fairdale, never been away from home, and the furthest you've ever been, you know, the extent of your time in the jungle is Jefferson Memorial, you're going to freak out. The environment in Vietnam is very hot in its dry season, they had what they called a rainy season. What's the matter? What's the matter? Can you tell me? I need you to tell me. Yeah, that's Daddy's wedding ring.
Mama.
Mom just came downstairs. You want to go see her? Go give her a big old hug. Hang on. Oh, want me to the rescue. Okay, so the environment in Vietnam was covered with, it was horrible weather. It was the worst of both worlds again. Stupid hot or stupid rainy, right? You add in that the forest, the jungle, was covered with booby traps of some kind. The Vietnamese would, they'd dig holes, right? And they'd cover those holes, but inside those holes they would have bamboo sticks that were sharpened, right? And they would, I guess, put, the jungle had poisonous frogs and everything, and they would take poison from those frogs or even snakes and put them on the tips of those sticks. They would also take poop and put it on and smear it on the tips of those sticks. And so when a soldier fell through and basically got impaled in his legs, or probably in his legs or his feet, they were going to get infected as well with diseases. So Vietnam, the Vietnamese knew how young our soldiers were, and they took full advantage of it. They would send their women over as prostitutes to, give our 18, 19-year-old soldiers diseases. So the environment there was not friendly for the types of soldiers we were sending in. No question about it. And they were away from home for the first time. They'd never seen these things before. You're never going to react the right way when you've never seen it before. So, all right, number 8, pretend that you were drafted in the Vietnam War. Which of the following would you choose to do? Totally your opinion. Would you leave the country? Would you go to Vietnam? Would you go to jail? Which would you do? Some kids are going to say they'll go. Awesome. If I had been alive at that point in time, my parents are going to kill me for saying this, probably would have gone. But here's my gripe about a draft, and it's not just Vietnam. We saw this with the Civil War. We probably saw this with the American Revolution. We probably saw it with World War II. I would want to know why he's not going. He's a senator's son. Okay, well, I'm not going. That's my gripe. And so, I don't know, maybe, and if I had been smart enough to recognize that as an 18-year-old in 1968, I probably would have said, nope, not going. It's not fair. So that all leads us to question number 9, deferments. What is a deferment? It is where you're basically told you're excused from the draft. You don't have to go. Our president received 5 of them. President Clinton didn't go to the war. A lot of people called Bill Clinton a draft dodger. Muhammad Ali refused to go or refused service. We talked about that the other day. A deferment is where you're basically excused from being in the draft. It helps to know people in those situations, no doubt about it. Number 10, might be the last one. Now we got a couple more. If you received a deferment from the military, should there be a limitation on your ability to do the following? So basically, if you get drafted, but then you get a deferment, right? Should you be, for the rest of your life, let's say you don't go to the war because you get a deferment, should you be allowed to vote? Should you be allowed to run for public office? Should you receive a fixed income from the government? These are things that people take advantage of today that maybe they're not entirely deserving. I don't know. So that's something to think about. I don't have a problem with people voting, but I think if you took a deferment and did not want to go and didn't go to war or didn't respond to the call of duty, maybe you shouldn't be allowed to run for public office. So that fixed income, I don't know. So I'm gonna leave that opinion up to you. Right? I think these are interesting thoughts. These are gonna spark some discussion. So, all right, why or why not should there ever be a draft again? We talked about it earlier. I think the lawsuits would be silly. I think there would be lawsuits all over the place towards the Supreme Court. And I think eventually the United States government would just say, you know what, nobody's having to go. So while we still have a draft in place, we haven't seen it since the early 70s, and there's a reason for that. It would be a mess. Here in 2020, it would be a mess. when it comes to demographics and what types of people are being drafted. There would be people filing lawsuits that there are too many of this type of person being drafted, and then there would be lawsuits that would be claiming discrimination because there's not enough of these types of people being drafted, and the government would just be ready to pull their hair out. So, and I agree. I think that would be, I don't think it's a good idea. So, all right. We're doing just fine allowing people to sign up right away, or to sign up whenever they want. So, all right, that should be it. There's a couple pictures on here of some soldiers. Again, these are 19, 20-year-old guys, boys, carrying around these guns, with bullets wrapped around them, kind of like a necklace, a big necklace. And the picture down below, you've got the little girl running, and I think this picture defines pretty much like a generation, like almost like your grandparents or my parents' generation. You've got this girl, what looks like a younger sister, going to greet her younger brother at the airport. He's coming home from Vietnam. Not all soldiers received this treatment when they came home. A lot of Vietnam veterans came home being spit on, called baby killers, and they haven't gotten the love. And I think Vietnam veterans have gotten a raw deal. So while this picture, I think, does define a generation, I also think that there are a lot of Vietnam vets that are like, well, I didn't get that reception when I came home. So that's something for you to think about. Okay, we've talked a long time today about the Vietnam draft, so I'm going to shut up and let you guys get to work. See you later.